Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rob Talks podcast. And this is episode 35. And in today's episode, we're going to be focusing upon a really interesting topic that I've been thinking about recently, which is all to do with understanding status. Now, on the surface level, that may seem pretty easy to understand and pretty not helpful in terms of what could be advice for your life. But the truth is that status actually gets into our lives a lot more than we realize a lot of the time. And in this podcast episode, I'm going to be going through what my own experiences is with status, and also of how once you understand how you use status and how people around you sometimes can even manipulate using status, you can then see how you can change your life for the better. So first things first, what actually is status? Status is defined as the relative social or professional position that is seen. So a lot of the time, status is seen as hierarchy in terms of the triangle of whether you're the boss, you're the assistant, you're the secretary, whatever it may be. Status is usually applied to hierarchy. But the issue with this is that that status is mainly only focused within the job world and different industries and different career paths that you can take. And this idea of that you have to climb the ladder and go from the lowly job to eventually become the CEO. But the truth is that status can in fact implicate different parts of our lives in much more intimate ways than we realize a lot of the time. So to understand this better, it's probably a good idea if I give you an example. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast episode is not in spite or anything like that, but I recently got a DM on LinkedIn, and I can understand that with the context of it, and I can understand why the person replied in the way that they did. But quite clearly, I could see in all of the undertoning of the message that they were using their status. They were using the fact that they had more experience than me, the fact that they had a form of entitlement because of that experience that they've had. And so consequently, the attitude or the way that the message came across in a sense of that it felt like they were pushing their status on me to make me feel as though that I can't go and do what I want to go and do, or that I can't go on and achieve what I want to go on and achieve. And this is something that actually happens a lot within our lives, and we don't realize it because it can be sometimes so subtle. The truth is, when we meet as humans and we see a new person and we speak to somebody, we are able to observe incredibly quickly, within less than a second, I believe it is, of what we think of that person, and even in terms of where we view them in terms of status. It can be so easy to quickly decide within the start of a conversation whether you think that person that you are talking to is more intelligent than you, is more important than you, and essentially create a sense of status between yourselves, whether you think that you are above them or whether you think they are above you. And it's something that happens a lot of the time subconsciously. And that's why we don't think about it. But think about it now. When are there times in your life that you feel as though status has come into the conversation in both ways? There may be times of where you've talked to somebody and you wanted to advise them on something, and you may have used your status too much to really implicate the kind of advice that you are giving, or the attitude that you have towards that person, or the perception that you have towards that person. And it can be the other way as well. It can feel like sometimes that there were times in your life of where you weren't heard, and somebody wouldn't listen to you, and somebody would dampen down your dreams or tell you it's impossible, you can't do it, because they wanted to imply more of their experience and status upon you to make sure that you can't go and do what you wanted to do. And that can happen sometimes. It can happen both subconsciously and sometimes, in rare cases, more on purpose. And that's why I think that this thought is something that's been going around my head a lot recently, because we need to understand what status is all about, and we need to understand and be self-aware of when it actually occurs in our lives. because that way you can assess a decision or a piece of advice or something that somebody has said to you, or a conversation, interaction, whatever it may be. You can start to determine what you take from that interaction. So, for example, the biggest thing that I'm getting as my position as a university student is when you are looking at career options, and in particular more entrepreneurial options, which are more risky supposedly, and that people don't believe I have enough experience yet or anything like that. Those are the kind of conversations where it is easily done. And to be honest, I'm somebody that's quite self-aware with anything like that, and so I entirely understand why it's happening. But they are the easiest conversations of where another individual can force their status upon you. And the key to overcoming that, of making sure that you don't push your status on somebody, and that you don't feel as though that you are too undermined or anything like that, is to be open. The key thing is to be open. And this is something that, in fact, Simon Sinek talks about in the sense of focusing upon leadership and entrepreneurship. Simon Sinek has a book which is called Leaders Eat Last, and it has a story within it which is linked from Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela, when he was younger, used to go to leaders meetings, his tribe meetings, because his dad was the leader of this tribe. And his dad would do this amazing thing of where within the meeting, he would stay silent and he would listen to what everybody had to say and only speak last. He would make sure that everybody's voice is heard, that everybody's opinion is heard. He wouldn't imply his status upon anybody in that room. And he would wait until the end to listen and to evaluate and speak of his own opinion of what his thoughts and opinions were. And I think that that's the perfect scenario or example, really, of how we should approach our lives more. We should be more open in connections and in conversations and in different parts of our lives, if it's career, if it's relationships, if it's meeting new people, whatever it is. We have to be able to have a more open perspective, to be open to the other individual, to be smarter than you, to have more experience than you, to maybe even to what you imply to supposedly have more status than you, but to say that's okay. And probably even more importantly, on the flip side, when you feel as though that maybe your status, because of what society permisses or the area of focus of context in that connection that you are having with somebody or that conversation you are having, and you feel as though you are the person that is the higher person, be open, be humble, be respectful. And in doing so, you will allow for so much better interactions and conversations. It's too easy to get tangled up in the game of status. And it can happen in the smallest of possible ways. I've spoken to people about this in terms of status and where it can happen in life. And it can happen for even, say, people that of a older age. There is the classic thing of where a lot of the time within communities and even within a village community of like where I live, it's so easy that if somebody feels as though they lack purpose or they lack something within their life, the easiest thing that they can do is to find a way to bump their status up within the social hierarchy, or at least what they think people will perceive. And so people become volunteers in X thing, and they join X community and try to lead X community and try to bump themselves up so they know that they have that little bit of power or that little bit of influence that they can then play with. And it happens all the time. It happens within the elderly. It happens when you're a kid and you're at school and you're trying to use the fact that you are the more popular friend to be the fact that you can get people to come to your party, or that when you're a toddler that you get to use that toy and not another child because you are the person with power and influence. When the fact of the matter is, status is entirely based upon perception of value and the perception between the two individuals. And once we have that understanding, we can make so much better connections. We can make so much better outcomes within our lives. And I believe for me, the best time of where I felt like that has worked in my life the best is I remember when I was running Enactus in second year, I focused on this element within the committee that I was running that I so badly just wanted to make sure that it was as flat as possible. That yes, I made the last decision in terms of yes or no, but that everybody felt as though they could contribute and they can be in that safe space to just talk, to be in a culture of where you felt safe to do what you're going to do, that it's okay to fail as long as you go forward from it and you learn from it. And it was okay to speak your mind, to have your opinion, and to have your own perspective. And I felt like that out of all the times in my life, all the experiences I've ever had in my life, that's the perfect time of where it's felt like getting rid of status, or not putting so much of a higher value upon on what status is somebody in terms of hierarchy, made us work better together, made us have deeper relationships, deeper connections, and to be honest, I believe provided better results than we would have if we had a more strict hierarchy system. And it's something that I'm so passionate about within the area of entrepreneurship and leadership. But I think now it is time for anybody who is listening to see also, if that isn't the area that you're focused on or wanting to focus upon, see how that implicates to your life. Are there friends that are putting themselves in a perception value of a higher status than you, but you believe that that is ultimately having a negative consequence? Then maybe you assess of what your relationship is with that friend anymore. Is it actually worth being friends with somebody that's going to be negative around you, or is going to push their perceived status upon you to make you feel small? Or even the other way, are there times of where for yourself within relationships that you've had, if it's with your girlfriend, boyfriend, if it's with your parents, your auntie, your uncle, grandpa, grandma, is there ever times that you felt that as though you've maybe pushed your status upon them? And so consequently, your relationship isn't as good as it could be. That's what I think comes from all of this, is that if we want to be able to live happy and fulfilled lives, and we want to be able to have better connections, deeper connections, connections and relationships that help one another, that support one another, that are positive and ultimately help us all to be happier people, then we have to understand the status game and understand the implications of it. And also when the times are important for status, but most importantly, when they are not. Because there are times when you need to show off the fact that you are the leader and you are the person that is of higher status to help somebody. But at the same time, you have to focus upon when are the times that maybe I'm forcing my status upon somebody too much, or even speaking to somebody you feel is forcing their status too much upon you. Or even if you feel as though those conversations wouldn't be helpful, it's important to at least understand that subconsciously status is there. And status can be the reasoning of why so many things happen in your life, and the reasoning of why so many things go a certain way. And so once you understand that, you'll be able to live a more anxiety-free, a more clear and more happy and fulfilled life. Ultimately, if there's anything that you take away from today's episode, focus upon how you can be more open in your perspective of others and your perception of others. Focus upon how you can be humble and how you can be respectful as well. Because once we tie these values together as human beings, then we are truly authentic. We are truly ourselves, and we truly can make happy, beautiful, wonderful connections and relationships to help us to live our best lives. You have been listening to the Rob Talks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next Rob Talks video. You have just been listening to the Rob Talks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and please make sure to subscribe and give me a follow on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, or even LinkedIn. And I will speak with you soon. Stay safe and have a great week.